Hello and welcome to this podcast on behalf of the Northern Ireland Ambulance Service. My name is John McPoland and I will be your host over the next few weeks as we take a look behind the scenes of the ambulance service. You will get to hear from staff across the organisation who together deliver this service for your benefit. I'm delighted that today we get to kick the whole series off by going straight to the top of the house and speak with our Interim Chief Executive, Maxine Paterson. Hello, Maxine. You're very welcome today, and thank you for taking your time to do this.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Just to get started, you're the Chief Executive of the Northern Ireland Ambulance Service, the Interim Chief Executive.
Correct.
But I'm sitting wondering, as you were going up through school and university, is that where you actually seen yourself finishing?
Absolutely not. It was not something that I ever anticipated, not only coming into public sector, but health service, let alone something as critical and as crucial as the ambulance service. Coming up through school, I was very interested in things that were, dinosaurs and ancient history and Egypt. And, my first thoughts were I wanted to be an archaeologist. Needless to say, that's not where I am now.
Or did you change that concept of where you wanted your life to go?
So whenever I was sort of coming up through school, I didn't really have a desire to do a triple award science and GCSEs or A levels. So I sort of pivoted and went towards history and English literature and politics. But getting to university was a very different experience than what I had anticipated. The subjects were quite involved and I just really felt it wasn't for me at that point. So I actually dropped out of university.
What happened to you then after you left university? Where did you go?
Well, I just started working because I was quite an independent person. I'd already secured a mortgage in my 20s and I needed to pay bills. So ultimately I started working, started off with some general sort of finance work, and probably then realised quite quickly that where I was, in the 90s and early 2000s, I sort of really did need a university degree to realise the ambitions that I had for myself and a career. And ultimately I rectified that by going back and studying part-time and working at the same time.
And what were you working at in those days?
It was very difficult. Over about 4 years, I did part-time study. And sitting at 2 o'clock in the morning, knowing that you're getting up and going to an early meeting at work is certainly not the best situation. But actually, it was right for me at that time, and I'm really glad I put the effort in, because without doing that and without focusing on those, I did a business management degree ultimately. Without focusing on that, I wouldn't probably have progressed or developed the way that I have during my career.
And where did you get the opportunity to put those skills and that educational qualification into practice? What were you working at in the early days?
So from sort of the early 2000s, I started working in an organisation called Norfolk Line, and they were the logistics arm of a shipping logistics company called Maersk, who's a global organisation. And I think where that gave me opportunities in that space, working in finance at that point when I first entered that organisation, being a global organisation and being many different opportunities within that, I exploited that. And probably the mid to late 2000s then, I had the opportunity to implement shared services into the European division of
So are you
that
the person
organisation.
responsible for bringing shared services into Northern Ireland here?
Well, I certainly was one of our organisation was certainly a very early adopter. We certainly saw in the rest of Belfast in the late 2000s, 2008 sort of onwards, other sectors adopting shared services. But ultimately that's where I sort of developed significantly, able to work around lots of Europe and implementing the same service that we had done in Belfast.
So that must have involved an awful lot of travelling for you, and you being people often look at people from Northern Ireland, a wee small place that it is, and then just spreading their wings and going all over Europe. How did you find that experience?
At first, it all seems very glamorous, as it would, traveling and staying in all different hotels and working. But actually, you find that it's quite isolating and quite lonely. The same club sandwich in a different hotel. And I felt yes, being from Northern Ireland, but also being luckily from a very close-knit family and community. I was certainly missing my husband at that point and my family. And but I still also was balancing that with the opportunities and the development that I got. But ultimately, it brought me back to Northern Ireland ultimately. And I'd sort of made a decision in sort of 2016, 17, after I had a significant event in my life, that I wanted to stay at home and
Now,
stay at home and
Maxine,
work at
you've
home.
just teased us here with a significant event. Is it something you want to share with us?
Well, yes, I can share it, but I think it's one of those events that certainly crystallizes how important family is and really makes you consider, what is important to you, and put everything in context. So, my sister Julie was involved in a very significant car accident. Actually, not with another vehicle. Actually, a tree fell on her car. Um, and Julie suffered a broken C3, C4. And for lay people like myself, that's a broken neck. Julie was extremely fortunate, in fact, miracle inducing, that she did not die that day. And in fact, her spinal cord remained intact. I probably that was my first brush with the ambulance service, but for the ambulance service and the fire and rescue service that supported her and transported her safely from that horrendous wreck to hospital, that her opportunity to continue to live a fulfilling life and support and bring up her family was made available to her.
And what
So
was the impact it had on you then? I'm assuming that Julie's much better now because you just said that
yeah,
she's living a full life.
absolutely. I mean, Julie would appear quite fine, but the impact that it had on me was really, as I said, crystallizing how important family was. Julie, all for intents and purposes, sort of moved in with me. I cared for her for a bit, and just helped her rehabilitate. She had a young family. She was very, very vulnerable whenever she came out of hospital and came out of the spinal injury unit. That just really reaffirmed how important my family were for me, and it also made me really question my continuing work at that point.
Yeah. I'm sure you were glad that you were home for that instance. That would have been terrible news to get when you would have been in some other European country and relying upon a ferry to get you home. Well, you'd obviously got a plane,
Well,
but
you
but
might
you
have
were
got a
home.
plane,
You
but
were home, and you'd been home for a couple of years,
I'd
hadn't you?
been home for a couple of years at that point. The traveling had sort of got to a point where it was challenging, but ultimately the decision that I made was based on the fact that um I would have been relocated permanently to Poland. Poznan in Poland, lovely city that it is. I've been there, but that would have taken me more long term away from my family, and it just wasn't right for me. It actually happened to coincide with the health service, unbeknownst to me, the health service in Northern Ireland looking to implement HR and finance shared services. And they had employed an agency to search about for people who might be experienced or have a background. And they stumbled onto me. And I was contacted out of the blue by an agency who had a conversation with me, and they invited me to interview for a client who at that point was nameless to me. And when I interviewed for BSO, which is the Business Services Organisation, which is the central shared services agency who delivered 21 services on behalf of all of arm's length bodies and trusts in Northern Ireland, came and interviewed for them, and ultimately was responsible then for being successful with the post, and then ultimately responsible for implementing 5 shared services, regional services in Northern Ireland within health.
So that's where you were working when Julie had her accident,
It
and then
did.
you came across the fire and rescue service and the ambulance service, and that just sparked within you something. It's much better than There's something much better than shared services out there. There's a chance to actually bring your skills to an emergency service, and that opportunity came for you in
It
2020.
It did actually, John. And you're right to comment on the focus, and I'm extremely passionate about doing a good job, about supporting a team, and about delivering at the same time. And I think that what happened is when I was exposed to the ambulance service in 2016, I followed that up, with a visit to the control room in 2017, and I was really blown away, just blown away by the staff, the professionalism, how they conducted themselves, and actually the real impact that they were making on patients, something that I felt was quite missing in the role that I was doing. Don't get me wrong, I was
No.
saving money recurrently in order to be able to, the other trusts could bring in more staff, but I just felt like disconnected. And the opportunity to see the ambulance service in 2017 really changed my sort of outlook. What can I do to bring the same skills and experience to actually helping patients and actually supporting staff to help patients? So ultimately, an opportunity came up in 2019. A role, the Director of Planning and Performance and Corporate Services, was advertised for the ambulance service. And I came along and met the Chief Executive, Michael Bloomfield, at the time, and just sort of said, what does this entail? What are you looking for this organisation? Trying to understand, can my skills and what I could offer would fit in with that type of role?
It was going to be a brand new focus, just bringing those two things together, what our performance is and what our planning is.
Mm-hmm.
When you first arrived, and I'm sure you were busting to get in there to make changes which you thought would have improved, but there was something else in the way, wasn't there?
Yes, a big COVID-19 was in the way. And I would say that whilst it was a challenge and a significant challenge for Northern Ireland and the amount of people who, who contracted COVID and the outcome from that, but came into an organisation and I was able to see an organisation at its best and also at its most challenged. So it was quite an opportunity for me to see that. Luckily for the ambulance service, Michael was adding capacity into the senior team to try and manage this, but it was a very, very challenging time. I was coming in when we weren't in business as usual, and business as usual means performance management, planning, short, medium, and long-term planning. What does that look like for the organisation? And the opportunities to do that at that point were not there.
Yeah.
So
yeah. As COVID came and the first wave went, and there's a wee bit of, let's see if we can recover a wee bit.
A lull.
But then COVID came back. In those periods of recovery from COVID for organisations, what did you find was needed within the organisation? Was there anything missing that was stopping us reaching our full potential?
Well, it was very evident quite early on, and something that I had spent time always focused on in other parts, on other roles, was information. And the challenge that we had in that space, and we have a lot of data, but actually, what does it mean? What insight can we derive from that? And we probably had at that point lots of data, but no information. That's how I describe it, and that was really obvious during COVID because we were trying to understand the planning, and I mean operational planning in a short term. What would we need by when? But we didn't actually know where all our resources were, what all of our demand was. We knew what had happened the week before, but we didn't know what we expected it to be in the following week. Therefore, we were quite challenged in that aspect, and that was probably the first thing that I got on to focus on.
And then, but as you tried to focus on that, I'm not saying it was a piecemeal effort, but once you start sitting down thinking COVID's behind us and you get making a bit of progress, bing, back it comes, another wave of COVID that's got to take everybody's attention away from what they're doing to focus on our response to COVID. But COVID didn't only impact upon us, and I suppose in many ways the impact it had on other parts of the health service led to a greater and longer lasting impact on us. What was that?
So certainly what we saw is prior to COVID, obviously looking at the data that we do have from that time, an organisation with, let's say, limited delays in handovers at hospitals. And what we certainly saw from the COVID waves and then the lull, as you say, and then building back to normal service. Normal service didn't really get to a point where we had prior to COVID, especially in our unscheduled care pathway. And that, to me, that means us getting to a patient and getting them to a definitive care, which for the majority of our patients is ED, coming into ED and our handover times were certainly starting to be impacted, but that wasn't at that point out with anything else we were seeing in the UK. Handover times in the UK were starting to deteriorate rapidly and continue to deteriorate over those couple of years post-COVID. And at this point in Northern Ireland, unfortunately, have been at the lowest performance that
Well,
we've seen to
you have
date.
been interim chief executive since April time.
Yes.
So you have 5 years really in the job as director of planning and performance. It would be remiss of me not to ask you, our performance is as bad as it's ever been. It's worse than it's ever been. It's never been this bad. How do you feel about that personally? You know, is it from a professional perspective? It's obviously not where you want it to be, but what is there any light at the end of the tunnel for us?
I would say absolutely yes. I am very positive about the future of this organisation and how we can deliver better performance and supported by planning in the future. Those 5 years, which included a couple of years of COVID and the deteriorating landscape in which the organisation was working in, has absolutely, we've have so much more insight into how this organisation can be more effective and efficient, and getting to patients at the right time. We know our clinicians just want to deliver the care
So what do we
to
need
our
to do?
staff.
What is it we need to do?
So the infrastructure that we recognised was probably the infrastructure that we recognised wasn't in place to support clinicians doing that. We understand that and the mechanics of that a lot more now. So it's about putting in those enabling steps to assure patients that clinicians can get to them in the most timely response that we can, based on the amount of staff we have and the demands that we're under.
So the public are always going to judge us really in the first instance how quickly we get them, you know, and then obviously it's going to be the outcome for the patient, where that's going to be the lasting memory for people.
Of course.
But in terms of getting to people quicker, does this mean we're just going to flood the place with more crews?
Absolutely not. I mean, I think there's a couple of things. There's two or three key things that we will be doing in this organisation in order to improve that. The first thing is, from the unscheduled care landscape, we have been working with Health and Social Care Trusts in order to support NIAS and their ED teams in order to be able to release crews a lot more quickly at ED, to allow our crews to get back out to the community and attend those patients, especially the patients get to the sickest quickest, which has always been something that we have tried to do. The second thing is that looking internally, we're looking at what our workforce looks like and how we support the increase in that workforce in order to meet the demands that we're seeing within the community. We also recognise there is a ageing demography in our communities, and we have to ensure that those patients, especially those who are over 65, who make up 50% of the patients who call us, that we have our services meet what their requirements are. Most of those patients are frail, elderly, some have had falls, a lot have had respiratory problems. So we need to make sure that we configure our workforce to be able to meet the demands of our patients.
And I'm not even going to mention the twinkle that came in your eye when you were looking at me talking about ageing populations, Maxine. I'm not even going to mention that. But what I am going to mention, that over your right shoulder on that banner we have putting patients first. You know, and that's going to be the mantra for anybody who works in healthcare,
Absolutely.
anybody who wants to come into it.
And that's exactly what our strategies are designed to do. Because ultimately we want to give the right care to that person as close to their home as possible, because we do not want to be taking our senior citizens to an ED, a very busy, crowded ED, lots of noise, and are not there to deliver ultimately the service that elderly patient needs. Normally with comorbidities, there has to be a better way for that patient. We do not want to be patients admitted to a ward, staying there for many days, deconditioning, and then potentially not getting home. We all have a duty in the healthcare to prevent that from happening. And that's actively what we're working on.
Yeah, and something that I think gets missed in an awful lot is that we do the vast majority of stuff, like everybody else in healthcare, we do it right. but when it goes wrong, it tends to get public headlines because people are more prone now to run to the media and say, I haven't got an ambulance, or I haven't got my appointment, and I haven't got this. And we do tend, sometimes there are very high profile cases, and there have been a couple recently.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is the public confidence in us diminishing, and should it be?
Well, I think back to your first point, we're a public service and we have to be held accountable. And the public decide that they wish to go and do that through the media or whatever that is. We shouldn't shy away from that challenge. We're here to be open and transparent. And I think in the recent cases, we can't fail to recognise how challenging those have been, not just for our staff, for those patients and for their families. So we have to understand that if there's something that we have got wrong, and the challenge is if we make an error, not an accidental error, or we do something poorly in our service, it can have catastrophic impact to a patient and to their family. So we have to recognise that.
Yeah.
The second thing is, you're right, the several hundred calls we get a day, the 200,000 calls that we get a year. We absolutely see so many patients where we get it right. And we see that coming in the hundreds and hundreds of compliments that we get every year from patients who've had a really good experience. Not necessarily, they're not contacting us about the actual what intervention we made. It was about how we made them feel. We made them feel safe and secure, and that we were going to look after them. And they felt really confident about that. So we get lots and lots of compliments as well. But the impact that it has on staff when they see media, when they see headlines, it really is quite challenging. It's totally understandable. But it's for us, we talked there about strategies. We talked about strategies, but we know that culture eats strategy for breakfast, as the saying goes. And therefore, we have to ensure that we have a culture in this organisation of being open, of being safe to speak up. They can talk about challenges and issues they've had, because ultimately we need to learn from those things that have gone wrong, and we need to do something in order to support staff to make sure that they can't get it wrong in future, or we make it as difficult for them to get wrong. And that's about all of our behaviours and how we support our staff. So it's about, as I said, making sure the staff feel that they can come and say if they've made a mistake, so that we can assist and work out what's happened and make sure it doesn't happen again. But the second thing, that they feel comfortable to do that they're in an environment where they feel supported and they feel valued and they know that they're part of a team.
Can I ask you then directly, what do you feel that you do to let staff know they're supported? Because um, it's, sometimes headquarters is viewed as being way up there, out of the road, right?
I've heard ivory tower being mentioned
Ivory
before.
tower. I
Yeah.
didn't want to use the term, but it's the ivory towers. People sometimes wouldn't even know where to find their way about this building,
Mm-hmm.
and don't know the people that are in it. So what do you feel that you do to make people aware of who you are and what you are, and understand what their job is?
Well, I think it's on a number of fronts. My role, first of all, I'm representing this organisation to the external system, and I'm there to advocate and champion for our service and for our clinicians. And ultimately, that means that will support our patients and their outcomes. Internally, we have our senior management team, and I am very clear about the standards that I expect. And those standards are in regards to our values and how we treat each other and how we treat our teams and how we support and enable our teams to do a good job. And that really is, that really is the goal that we're trying to achieve. So that cascading of that through the SMT team will go some way to be able to allow me to understand what is going on in the organisation. Meeting with trade unions is really important. Developing the partnership, working arrangements with trade unions is key to hearing the voice of the staff, what they're thinking, what they're saying, that they feel comfortable speaking to their trade union representatives rather than maybe speaking to their manager directly. And that's something that we have to overcome and continue to work on. And then the third aspect from an internal perspective is me going out personally and meeting with teams I have been on a number of ride-alongs. I've been to a number of divisional tours. I have showed up at EDs. I've been down in control just last week whenever we had significant challenges. There, the staff were under a lot of burden last week. So it's about me going and hearing directly from them.
And how do you find the engagement with the staff? Are they forthcoming?
Oh, I think in general they are forthcoming, and I think that is about me making sure that they feel comfortable, that they can speak to me, that they're safe to speak up. They can say whatever they need to me. It's said in confidence, and it helps inform the thinking that I have about how us as a senior team can support and enable the organisation to be the most effective that they can be. And that's not just about being most effective, that's giving the team an environment where they feel that they can come into work, that will be listened to, they'll be valued, and they'll enjoy coming to work, because that's what we need. People are really interested in coming and work in this service. We have to give them an environment that they enjoy, because we want to retain those staff. We don't want them going somewhere else. It's especially important for all the students who are coming through. There's an environment that they're comfortable in and that they'll thrive in. And if they thrive, our patients will have better outcomes.
And you just mentioned a word there which 5 years ago you would never have heard in this organisation about students. What students are coming through this organisation now?
Well, I'm very pleased to say that we've had a number, we've had 48 students have come through in the last couple of years into the organisation. They are our BSc qualified staff, and that's great because they supplement and complement the staff that we already have within the organisation.
And what level are they coming in at?
So they're coming in as a band 6 paramedic.
Paramedics.
They're coming in as a paramedic, and they're coming in as newly qualified paramedics, and then they go through a training, training over the next year, in order to make them fully autonomous practitioners. So they'll go out with a crew. In fact, I think most of our crews have a student at the moment, which is great for the student and to learn from our established staff, but also then to hear about practice that's coming through that might just slightly be, knowledge and experience that might be different to help enhance our practice overall.
So those paramedics coming through and that are due to come through is actually enhancing our workforce. The difficulty we have got into over the past 6-7 years has been constant decline. So fixing it isn't going to be done overnight.
No, that's correct. And I think the insight that we've got from the data in looking at our workforce, we have vacancies there. We need to fill those vacancies. And it's not that there's probably been a decline. We probably know more than what we did 5 years ago and 4 years ago and 3 years ago. And developing that workforce strategy that I talked about earlier is really key. The pipeline from the university is key.
Yeah.
But we can still we still have opportunity to bring in qualified paramedics from other parts of the UK and beyond in order to fill those vacancies.
And the other roles in the front line, are they being filled or?
Absolutely. I think we've brought in nearly 200 staff in the last couple of years. We're very much focused, EMTs, emergency medical technicians, are very much crucial to delivery of this service. Not there's that. Then we also are embarking on a rolling training and recruitment program within our control room that will be really vital in order to ensure that we have the people who are taking the first call into this organisation are supported, and from that call right through to our response and right through to leaving them at hospital, the patients at hospital, that we have a resilient, stable, well-supported team at each part of that journey for the patient.
And all that's all about our emergency tier, but we've always had a very, very important non-emergency tier. What's happening with them while all these advances have been made in emergency care?
So we have been looking at the scheduled care team, how it's made up, how we plan, how we operationalise that on a daily basis. And we've been making significant inroads into making the operation much more efficient, which allows our ambulance care attendants to go out and spend the right time with patients and getting them to appointments in time. So those staff regularly see people who are going for renal and chemotherapy appointments are the majority of those appointments. But we've had to think about that growing demand in that space, as I talked about the demography earlier in our aging population, and think about how we support those staff to get to as many of those patients as possible. So we've been looking at much more of how we do that much more efficiently. And to that end, we've also recognised that they've also they could also be it could also be enhanced with the right amount of a little bit more management in order to support those teams in each division. And we've just recently recruited some new leads for our scheduled care part of the service as well.
So in years gone by, Maxine, then there are people who are currently paramedics who would have started in this organisation as ACAs.
Mm-hmm.
With the degree course for
Mm-hmm.
paramedicine, is that route to paramedic now cut off? Can ACAs move through to EMTs, and does that stop their progress then?
Absolutely not. We certainly recognise that there are those staff who have joined us through that route, and we want to make sure that they have the same opportunity because they already bring a level of knowledge and experience to the BSc course. So we have protected 10 spaces within that Bachelors of Science for our EMT cohort who can go through and undertake the paramedic degree. I actually met some of them last week up in Magee, the Magee campus, because it was great to see all the new students who have come in. I think I met 54, although we have more spaces than that, but I met 54 students last week. And right at the front row were our EMTs who were undertaking the paramedic degree. And they bring so much to the student group that are sitting there. They've already been out and been there and done that.
Exactly it.
You know?
One of the things that they bring is that experience of dealing with patients and dealing with people. And I don't think you can learn that in a book. You're born with that, and that's honed as you come into the service. And whereas going forward, some of our EMTs may learn from our degree paramedics, but our degree paramedics, if they're sensible, will learn so much from the EMTs.
Absolutely.
And the old expression doesn't change. From when I was on the road, a paramedic is only as good as his EMT. That was always said, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
But apart from the workforce, etc., what are we going to give them to do? What are the big things coming down the track in the next year, 18 months, that's in terms of delivery of our service? Is there anything that we would like to highlight here?
I think there's a number of things. As we get traction on the reduction and handover delays and a bit more capacity back into the service, it's really about looking at how we support and manage patients appropriately. We're developing new roles within this organisation and that professional development piece, so that our ACAs or EMTs and our paramedics can look at advanced roles, can look at postgraduate training in order to become more specialised. You know, we have our HEMS team, we have our heart team, we have critical care paramedics, we have advanced paramedics. All of these roles have a role to play in delivering the service in future. Certainly what the system, the health and social care system requires and what the Department of Health is looking at is how we as a service might change and adapt and do things differently going forward, not taking away from our bread and butter, which is our emergency service, but how we might support patients in the community in a different way. And to that end, we're going to be doing some piloting of different ways of working. We've already established a clinical hub within the organisation, but we have to get our fundamentals right, and we have to look at what we're doing within the service. So we're embarking on a programme of transformation going forward to do both.
So then, if it's possible, in a sentence or two, and I know you are interim chief executive, and you may be here in a year's time, you may not. That's just the way
Yes.
things go. Hopefully for you, you are. But what would your vision be?
Well, certainly I am interim, but my vision and what I am working on at the moment is a culture that supports our staff. So ultimately, I would expect to see a healthy workforce supported and feeling valued to deliver excellent care for patients. That's as as short as I can make it.
No, and that's how you define visions, but you keep them short and simple, and all the work that's got to go in behind it to deliver it. That's a very fair vision, I think. And you have spoke a lot about your staff,
Hmm.
and you've talked about the importance. And some of your messages to the staff, you
Hmm.
always talk about looking after yourself. Always look after yourself. Do you do what you preach? How
Do what
does
I
our
do.
chief executive look after herself mentally? Because it's a scary place to be, and it can be a very lonely place to be sometimes up at the top of the ivory tower.
I think I've learned from lots of people over the years that your physical health is related to your mental health, and you need to be able to talk and you need to be able to share the challenges that you have. I have an amazing family and friend network. I have great mentors that I can speak to within the organization. We have our two at the top, which is myself and our chair. And I find those conversations very supportive as well. But ultimately, I get to the gym. I frequently, I read a lot. And those are some of the I suppose what I do outside of work to keep myself mentally focused and resilient. You're right. It can be challenging, but you just need to keep talking and look for help and look for support where you can get it. And I would encourage everyone to do the same.
Maxine, thanks very much for coming in and having a chat with us. I hope that is give some of the staff and the public an insight into the person who leads this organisation, this great organisation that we're all so very proud of. Sometimes we may fall out, but we're all trying to do our very, very, very best for those people in the community who need us most. So once again, thank you for coming in. We will no doubt have you back in a period of time to see how the promises or the vision that you have, how's that being delivered,
Mhm.
So
Okay.
again, thanks very much for coming in. And
Thank you.
again, that's the end of this podcast. I hope that you gain some insight into what goes on in the life of a chief executive, what drives a chief executive in the ambulance service. And I hope that you join us for more of our podcasts over the coming weeks and the next few months. Thanks very much and goodbye.